Phyllis is bringing up the rear. I just had to give you a hard time. Okay, well, we'll get started back, and I don't have a whole lot more, but there is a little bit more that I want to share with you, and then I really appreciate you allowing me to come and to share and to practice on you. I already see some things I need to do, so yeah, you guys are awesome.
We love having you here.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk about beats. We were just talking about music, and I don't remember your name, sir. I'm sorry. Ron was asking me if Rick had ever worked with Willie, and yes, he did. And as a matter of fact, the foreword in the poetry book is written by Connie Nelson. She is an adorable, sweet lady. Love her to death. But so anyway, when we think of beats, we think of music. You know, you got to keep the beat. You got to, and there's 8 beats to a measure. There's, but in writing, here's what Nicholas Rosses had to say about beats. There are basically 15 beats in every movie. Google defines beats like this. Beats are descriptions of physical action, minor or major, that fall between lines of speech to punch up your dialogue. When a character raises an eyebrow or furrows his brow, this action or beat interrupts the dialogue and telegraphs a change in the character's emotional state. That makes sense. So there are beats in writing, and they're especially used in the context of the show don't tell guideline. It's kind of the way of putting it all together where it flows. The beats are the stops, and then the flow, and then the stops, and then the flow. And so that's kind of how he described it in writing, and using the dialogue tags and showing action to create those stops, to create that interruption of the dialogue. It's a way to convey an emotion without naming it, like we talked about. She was scared. She was afraid. Or she was happy. I had a couple of examples that I wanted to show you that I thought were great as far as she says, my brother is very talented. Well, what does he do? She could say, my brother can sing like Elvis Presley and play guitar like Willie Nelson. Well, now we know what he can do. So, using those words instead of just making a statement is so important. So we have this picture in our head. We know what we want to say. We see the scene. We feel the emotion. We got to get it out in such a way that the reader also feels and sees in vivid color. That's our job. And we can use the 5 senses to do that. We can use every one of, we can view it, taste it, smell it, hear it, touch it. And like I said earlier in the presentation, what we all have in common is that we all want to feel something, whether it's happy, sad, whatever. We feel. We are emotion, and emotions are pretty much our guidelines in life. And so we want that to be in our writing. We want that to come across. Nobody groaned?
No, but go back and talk more about beats. Examples.
Okay, all right. Some more examples of beats. in some ways, writing resembles painting, and you've got the colors and you blend them and you swirl them and you do all these different things with painting, and we do the same thing with words. And so beats are especially useful in the context of the show don't tell guideline. And so when he named this book and the examples he gave, every example in here is a beat. Every example in here is a interruption in the flow of dialogue and a way of doing it. That's what a beat is. It's an interruption in the flow of dialogue. And you name the emotion. You don't tell it, you show it. You don't just say what it is. Okay, here's an example. Sally felt anxious. Okay, that's telling. But if you said, Sally clutched the hem of her dress, then forced herself to release it and straightened the fabric with long, nervous strokes, you kind of get a little better picture. He fearfully stepped onto the ladder. Yeah. Well, we know he's afraid of something, but what's it got to do with the ladder? Or, and he calls that, and I agree with him, that's lazy writing. That's taking the lazy way out, and you're not telling a whole lot about your character. He placed one uncertain foot on the ladder and raised his body. Will it hold? He wondered. He closed his eyes for a second, expecting the worn step to give way. When it didn't, he placed his second foot. Now here we're using a lot of words to say that he fearfully stepped on the ladder. And we talked about that sometimes you use more words. It is more interesting, because now we're like, well, what's he getting on the ladder for? What's he doing? I'm wondering. And why is well, he's already said it's worn out, and he's not sure it's going to hold him. So he's like, so when it didn't, he placed the second foot on the next step. His temples felt damp. Now I kind of have a little disagreement with that, because I have always been taught not to use the word felt or feel. So just get rid of it. His temples were damp. Whoops, there's word. Sweat rolled off of his temples. He resisted the urge to wipe them, his fingers clutching instead the railing even harder. The ladder held so far. So I think, what this author is saying by using the word beats is just a different way of saying use a dialogue tag, use an action, use an emotion. It's the same thing. He's just calling it a beat. It's that stop. It's that point where you've interrupted with something. And of course, I said at the beginning, a movie has 15 beats, and that is true. And any well-written movie will have those 15 certain stops, but it's not after every dialogue, and it's not after, it's in the motion of the action and the unfolding of the plot. But for us as writers, the beat is when it's an interruption to the flow of dialogue. That's basically what it is. Yes, ma'am.
Jen, could it also be like, yes, interruption, but a tie together?
Yes, it definitely. It's what ties everything together.
Right.
It is the link that links it all together. Mm-hmm. Yes. All right, can I move on to show, don't tell? And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, because you're all writers, you all know this, you all know that it's much more effective. And we've talked about it for the last hour, to show through emotion, through action, through senses, through our senses. When you think about describing a setting, like I recently wrote a scene where my characters were out in the country by a creek. And there are so many aspects to that I need to go back and add to in thinking of it, as like, the smells. You can smell the dampness. Maybe there's rotted leaves. Maybe there's birds chirping. Maybe there's just so many different things and different ways to bring that scene to life by using the senses, what they see, what they smell, what the ground feels like. Does it crunch? Does it, things like that. So it, again, the very basic definition of show don't tell is to use all of these senses and actions to show what's going on with the character instead of just telling. It's that simple. And then that also allows the reader to interpret it the way that they need to. Showing is simply about making the scene more vivid. My brother is talented. Then we could say, oh, he's playing guitar like Stevie Ray Vaughan instead of Willie here. Susan looked mad. Susan narrowed her eyes and set her mouth and stomped out of the room. Yep, she's mad. We get the picture. I would love to hear comments if anybody has any. That's basically my presentation. I hope that I've given you some handouts that you can use, some things that will make your writing a little easier and more vivid and more vibrant and easier to read. Yes?
Tell what you're doing now.
What I'm doing?
Working on now.
Oh dear. Well, I'm working on my first fiction book. Since all of these were true stories, there is a night and day difference between telling a story that you already know and making one up. And I'm loving it. I'm having a ball doing it, but it's a little overwhelming. And I think of it like when you go in the grocery store and you go to the cereal aisle. When I was a kid, there was a little section. That was it. You go in now and it's 2 aisles full of cereal. Most of the time I leave with none because I can't make a decision. I'm just like, no, never mind, I don't need it. So, but it's kind of that same thing with telling fiction. You can create anything. You can make anything happen to these characters. And so that's a challenge, and it's fun. It's like Linda was talking about when we were kids and we played paper dolls. We created worlds with these paper dolls. We had them marrying each other. We had them getting divorces. We had them doing all kinds of things. And so it's an awesome creative thing to do. I love every aspect of writing. I love every part of it. I loved writing songs. The whole thing is that you're telling a story, and it doesn't matter whether you're telling it in 3 minutes, or you're telling it in 300 pages, or you're telling it in an hour-and-a-half movie. It's a story, and I'm a sucker for a good story. I love them. So that's what I'm doing. I am, and I'm also doing workshops. There's a writers' conference coming up the first week in December, which is very soon, that I have 2 presentations. One of them is on marketing, which I'd be very happy to bring back to you guys at some point if you're interested. The other one is on interviews. And through the luck of the gods, I guess, I've had quite a bit of experience with interviews, and it's not an easy thing to do. It really puts you on task about yourself and your books. And so that's what I'm doing. I've loved coming to visit with you guys. Y'all are all so gracious. Thank you for letting me try this out on you. I know what I need to do. Back to the drawing board. But not too much. Yeah, just a little tweaking. It's just like with our writing. It's never perfect the first time. It's never perfect the second time. It's never perfect. It is what it is. But it's what we do. And so thank you. Any more questions? Feel free to contact me. I'm very easy to find. If you Google Jan Sikes, I'm going to come up. So if you feel free to contact me. Yes, ma'am.
Tell me, I can't see the blue on blue from here. What is your blog?
My blog is rijanjks.wordpress.com, and I would be thrilled for you to follow my blog. I have some really good stuff on there sometimes. I love having guests on my blog because, again, it goes back to that same principle of supporting others, and by supporting others, you can be supported. And it's true. It's true. I've gained a lot of new followers on my blog by featuring other authors. So that's always a fun thing to do. If you want to be my guest, let me know. Again, thank you. I appreciate you looking at my books and taking a minute to see what I have. Yes. I've actually had, since the last time I was here, which was 1 year ago in November, I really have released 2 books because I released the 4th one of the series and then the poetry book. So I stay very busy. And then in my spare time, I take care of grandbabies. All right. Well, thank y'all. I appreciate you.